My childhood in Chicago was filled with light and dreams, a time when the future seemed so limitless, and each new day brought the joy of discovery. I remember children laughing in the warm sunshine of the streets, where every house breathed life, playing on the pavement and dreaming of the big world. Beyond the familiar neighborhoods, memories of quiet evenings where the family gathered around a humble table, passing each other stories of what life could be like, still warm my heart. I, Emmett Till, grew up with a dream of belonging to this world, learning, making friends, laughing, and building a bright future despite the challenges of the times. School was a place for me to absorb knowledge and dream that one day I could change my destiny. Each lesson was like a small adventure. Each new page of the textbook was like a window to another world, where great achievements were waiting for me. But even in those joyful times, amidst the games in the yard and the ringing laughter of my friends, sometimes shadows flickered, barely perceptible, like a cold wind against the warmth of the sun. I didn't realize that these silent premonitions were just the beginning of a coming storm that would turn my world upside down. Those quiet, barely noticeable moments when the gazes of others suddenly froze, when invisible barriers began to separate me from the others, were like the first drops of rain before a heavy downpour. A feeling grew inside me that I was part of something bigger, even though at times I felt like my difference might be an obstacle. Dreams of the future were intertwined with a slight anxiety, and I involuntarily wondered, would I be able to find my place in this vast, colorful yet complex world? Those first days, full of hope, became my starting point. A starting point that I did not realize even then, that love, kindness, and childlike faith could be the key to the future. Struggle for truth and justice. With each passing day, I absorbed the energy of small victories and quiet joys, not suspecting that this innocence would become the very fire that would illuminate my long, thorny path from now on. These memories, bright, pure, and warm, were the tiny light that lit a spark in my heart before the storm that would change my existence forever began. In that small town, where time seemed to pass more slowly, and the air was saturated with antiquity and cruelty, I was confronted for the first time with the ruthless reality of racism. It began abruptly, innocent. Behavior that seemed natural suddenly became a cause for immediate condemnation. In the narrow aisle of a local store, in the raindrops of rain, I heard words filled with scathing hatred. Words that, like a sharp knife, pierced my heart and made me think that a world worth living in could be full of malice and ruthlessness. Every tiny detail of that terrible day, from the flickering, erratic light of the old lamps to the raindrops rolling down the dusty shop windows, created an atmosphere of imminent disaster. The gaze of others turned into a cold mirror, reflecting not just fear, but a deep condemnation that seemed to emanate from space itself. In that moment, even time slowed down, allowing me to remember every detail. The first tear rolling slowly down my cheek, the first gasps of contempt echoing down the hallway. I remember standing there, alone and powerless, feeling that in an instant my life had stopped. Everything I knew about the world dissolved under the pressure of incomprehensible, cruel judgment. Those moments were the final line between the world of childhood and a world ruled by fear and hate. I realized that I could never go back to the time when hope and dreams were so clear and every morning was greeted with a smile. The sharp, irreversible rift that day left scars in me that will follow me for the rest of my life. Since that fateful day in Mississippi, I had lost my innocence forever. A pain had built up inside of me that no words could drown out. Every second of that day sounded like the echo of a merciless verdict that forever changed my perception of life and made me believe that justice is an empty word if it cannot protect the most defenseless. That horror became the first twinge of suffering that, more than ever later, there was no way to escape. After that fateful day in Mississippi, the world I had once enjoyed was forever changed. The news of Emmett Till's death, which spread throughout the country, consumed the minds and hearts of the people, awakening in them a sense of sudden and indescribable grief. When Emmett's mother, despite her fear and pain, decided to open mourning, the whole world felt the cruelty behind the words and promises. The open casket became a symbol of a brutal truth that exposed a ruthless reality, innocence destroyed by the fury of prejudice. I remember how, after this event, the streets, previously filled with life, fell into silence, where the sounds of wailing and wistful voices echoed through every corner of the small town. People gathered in the streets, discussing what had happened, trying to understand how this could have happened in our world, where it seemed justice should have been served. This tragedy was the catalyst for a national shock, a moment when millions reflected on the cost of prejudice and hatred. A realization dawned in the soul of everyone. Who knew Emmett's story? Our system is unjust, and its ills demand change. Faces clouded with grief reflected deep sorrow and rage at the same time. Rage against the fact that our country allowed such an atrocity to happen. Every sound, every raindrop in the streets, seemed a reminder of the unbearable loss that was imprinted on the hearts of the people. Public outrage enveloped the entire nation, and the voice of Emmett's mother became a symbol of the struggle for truth. The tragedy of that day, notorious and unforgettable, was a hard lesson for anyone who ever doubted the need for change. For it is through pain and tears that the power to awaken the consciousness of millions and change the course of history is born. These days of deep grief and realization were the beginning of a long journey, leading to a civil revolution in which the memory of Emmett Till became the fire that ignited the hearts of the fighters for justice. Time marches on inexorably, but the memory of Emmett Till's tragedy remains alive in the hearts of millions, becoming a symbol of the struggle for truth and justice. His story was not only a nightmare, but a spark for a civic awakening that changed the destinies of generations. Emmett's great legacy is not only a bitter sadness of loss, but also a force that unites people, inspires struggle, and reminds us that every drop of tear can be the beginning of a revolution for good. Today, when the streets of cities are filled with the voices of new activists, when powerful murals depicting Emmett's face shine on walls, people are once again talking about the importance of equality and dignity. Every rally speech, every handshake from participants in the civil rights movements are all living reminders that the fight for justice continues. The truth of his name reflects not only tragedy, but also the unwavering will of millions of people who are not willing to be silent and leave the past behind. Emmett Till's story has come to symbolize that even the most brutal injustice can be a jumping-off point for great change. We remember him as the embodiment of lost innocence, but also as a sign that change begins with awareness and unification. These words, these unyielding voices of solidarity, ignite a spark of hope in the darkest of hearts, inspiring feats and bringing light to the world around us. Today we look forward with faith that his memory will live on in every act of courage, in every struggle for human rights. Every protest, every gathering, every voice advocating for justice is a tribute, a vow that we will never forget the lesson his tragic fate taught us. Our collective effort, our fierce cry against discrimination, is creating a future where equality is not measured by the color of our skin, but by our strength of spirit and justice. As a new day dawns, as the first rays of sunlight break through the darkness, I feel that the memory of Emmett Till is the immortal flame that warms and lights our path. It is our legacy, our responsibility to catch every spark of change and turn it into a flame that can dispel the darkness. May his name forever be a symbol of resistance, hope, and an unwavering struggle that will continue until injustice gives way to equality and love.